Welcome to the Minnesota Rovers Tuesday evening presentation. Minnesota Rovers is an outdoors club based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our members organize trips that range from 1 hour to 2 weeks in Minnesota or further afield. Examples of our activities include hiking, biking, backpacking, skiing, snowshoeing, paddling, and rock climbing. We also organize conservation and trail clearing trips. Our members have experience and skills in many outdoor activities, so if you want to learn a new outdoor activity, we can probably help you. For more information, go to mnrovers.org. Now let's move on to this week's presentation.
Tonight, you're here to hear from Tom about his Cherries, Cascades, and the Columbia Valley bike touring in Washington State trip. Tonight's presenter, Tom Yuska, a Rover since 2021, has been doing self-supported bike touring for nearly 40 years. What? His adventures have included riding across the US, the length of England and Scotland, and a honeymoon trip from Alberta to Wyoming. For over 2 decades, he ran a summer youth bicycle program, teaching kids and teens bike repair and introducing them to the joys of exploration by bicycle. So please join me now in welcoming Tom Yuska.
So this trip they took this past summer, it was a 17-day trip, 14 of which were days mostly on the bike. We started in Seattle, or actually Seattle-Tacoma Airport, south of that, and then used Amtrak to get to our beginning destination down in Olympia, and then back from the northern terminus back down to Seattle. The whole trip, as you outlined in red, was about 600 miles, and it was quite a big elevation range, as you can see from the elevation profile at the bottom of the screen there. We had 4 different pretty major passes to go to, some flatlands along the river, and so it was great. It was a great route in terms of diversity of topography and all kinds of things. Self-contained gear, we carried all our gear. We did some camping. We stayed at inns, stayed with Warmshowers host, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and even a caboose. And our this route was planned using the Adventure Cycling maps. It's a great organization if you do any long distance touring or even not. I mean, I think they've been around since 1976, and I think they've developed around 40,000 miles of bike routes throughout the U.S. And to me, they're like the AAA of bicycling. This is an example of the map that I used, and it's just so detailed in terms of turn-by-turn directions, elevation profiles. There's some cultural things. There's part on the map that talks about the services and the towns you go through. So just a really great resource. And these things are also available kind of digitally. So this was the crew. It's me and my 2 kids, Paul and Ellen. I'm pleased that Ellen has joined on. She's on this Zoom call. She's calling in from, or checking in from Berkeley, California. So Ellen, if you have any comments or you need to fact check Dad, just let it go. So Stacy said I've been cycling for a long time, and so as a cycling dad, these kids were exposed to me, and some bicycling, like getting taken by a burly to their daycare and stuff like that. So they've had some exposure to that, and as they got older, have accompanied me on some trips. Ellen accompanied me on the last half of my cross-country trip as a 12-year-old. She cycled across Virginia with me, and then when she graduated from high school, she and I did that kind of north to south trip in England and Scotland. Paul took much longer for him to warm up. He did some trips with me, but as a kind of a young dude, it wasn't all that interesting to him. But as we used to tell our kids when they weren't interested in eating food, just said, give it 5 years and try it again. So I guess this past year was his willingness to try again. And so he joined us on this adventure, which was really cool. So the first day, as our first day was really kind of transition from the metro area around Seattle, Tacoma, to kind of an approach to get into the mountains next year. So lots of bike paths and then some just roads that weren't all the interesting kind of narrow shoulders and things like that. It wasn't all that great cycling, but by the time we got to about 10 miles away from our end destination, we started getting a sense that we were getting out to where we wanted to go. So some little hints of the mountains and it's starting to look, much more like nature. And then we traveled a little bit further, and then as we went down this hill, we came upon this, and this was a view of Mount Rainier that said, this is why we're out here. This really ended up being the best view we had of the mountain throughout our trip, just because of weather. So as I said, we were pretty close to the end of the day here, and this night's accommodations, Ellen found this place called the Hobo Inn in Elby, Washington, which basically is a string of cabooses that are connected together that you can stay in. So, I mean, we couldn't help but smile when we rolled up to this thing and, found the keys to our own caboose. So the kids had a great time hanging out in the cupola and just taking pictures. I mean, it was pretty comfortable. There were a couple beds, there was a shower, a table, and then, there's that cupola on top, which we utilized the next day with breakfast with a view, some convenience store breakfast with a view. So the next day was our kind of this was going to be our first test and launch. We were heading up into the mountains, up into Mount Rainier. And as you can see from the elevation chart, we gained about 4,500 feet over the course of the day, and really the bulk of that was probably in the last 10 or 12 miles as we really got inside the park boundary, then started going up to Paradise Inn. But Washington is known for its cherries, so we had to make a stop whenever we found cherries. So we hit this roadside stand, and Ellen was certainly delighted to get her hands on some. I think Rainier, or those might have been Yakima cherries, but it was a good way to start off the trip. So reaching the boundaries of Mount Rainier, great place for a family photo. And then we took off on, basically it was kind of the forest floor, starting our eventual ascent up the mountain. So here's a little video, a sense of what this cycling was. This, I guess, is our second day of the trip. Those of you that bike or hike in wild places, you just know, when you're in those spaces, you just get this 360-degree view of the world. And it's just so awe-inspiring, and you feel very small, but quite in awe. So I think the bulk of the afternoon we spent doing that last 10 or 12 miles, climbing, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 feet, and we ended up at the Paradise Inn Lodge. It's kind of the base of Mount Rainier. Built in the 1920s, it was really kind of very luxurious for us. This great 2-story foyer lounge with big fireplaces at each end. And I had in the park, the bookstore here in the inn, I bought a book written by a fellow who was in the 1920s or so. He ended up being one of the first park rangers there, and he talked about he his bride who had come from, I know, somewhere in the Kansas or something. Their first assignment was to basically be the winter keepers of the Paradise Inn, and they basically snowshoed up that 12-mile steep incline that we biked up and spent the summer there. And he also talked about how in the early days of the park that he would take visitors out and like they would slide down glaciers and things like that, stuff that really you can't do anymore. But it's pretty fascinating to learn about the early history of the park. Um, it, Even though our rooms were small, we felt pretty pampered. Every room got the occupants got a nice bathrobe and those mitts that Paul had in his hand, and we used those to plod down the hall to go to the shower room. So a little bit of luxury, and then you just kind of had to walk down. And everybody was doing it, so it was just kind of fun. So the next day we kind of left, heading down for probably our second day of challenge is climbing a couple more mountain passes. So a nice ride down to River Valley and then again climbing the next day. And here we had about a 3,500-foot climb at the end of the day up to Chinook Pass. But first we got to come down from Paradise Inn on this road called Stevens Canyon Road, and Ellen had done some research that this road was only open on the weekend, so we had to kind of readjust our schedule to be able to do this. Otherwise, we would have had to do a lot more detours or diversion, and it wouldn't have been as nice a road as this was. I mean, compared to yesterday and today, this day that the skies are clear and it was just like beautiful mountain scenery. And then we come around that first curve, and this is what we're going down. Just an amazing viewpoint and amazing scenery. And you can see that road was cut into the side of the mountain, and anything that's kind of that precarious, that's human built, always has some issues with the weather and erosion and things like that. So the first probably 4 or 5 miles of this was really kind of fun. And then we hit the construction where the road had been really kind of was being prepped for paving, which meant it was all kind of soft sand and gravel, which wasn't a lot of fun, but we just had to get through it. Again, just seeing the beautiful views up as we're climbing down and down, and Ellen has spotted a marmot, so we got to watch his antics for a few minutes as it climbed up and down the slopes. So this was near the end of that second day. We were nearing Chinook Pass. Again, a lot of climbing, long climbing, and this was about close to, I think, 5,500 feet, and it had gotten chilly. It's about 40 degrees there. You can see there are a couple of folks who were doing some camping down by the lake. There's the two kids getting up to the pass after lots and lots of work. And then those who backpack may be familiar with this. This is a bridge that the Pacific Crest Trail crosses Chinook Pass. So it's a great place to take a selfie. So at this point, we'd really worked hard to get up here and kind of heated up. And then we had about a 15 or 20 mile downhill in 40-degree weather. So at least for me, I had all my layers on to do that, even though we didn't pedal. It was a little bit of a challenge to stay warm. So now we were kind of on the eastern side of the Cascades, and things change in a number of ways. One, the benefit of riding in the mountains is the roads often follow rivers. So for a long time, we were following this river. I think it was the American River, and just the curving of the river and the roads would follow that, and the sound of the water just made it a really pleasant ride. Plus, we were going downhill mostly. The first couple of nights after Paradise Inn, we stayed at some Forest Service campgrounds, very nice along the river. This was a place where we tried out our first host in Olympia. She was a cyclist and a backpacker, and said, "Have you ever had ramen bombs?" And I don't know, maybe if you're a backpacker, you've heard about ramen bombs, but they're basically you take a package of ramen and a package of instant mashed potatoes and put them together so you get instant carbs, and it's like happens in 5 minutes, and it's really good and filling, and an easy meal. So I think we dumped some tuna in there for some protein, but it really matched what she said it would do. So here's the transition on the east side of the Cascades. Much drier, ended up being a little bit warmer. Just different as with all mountain ranges. As the weather approaches from whatever the front side, it tends to drop all its moisture as it goes up and over the mountain, and the upper side is much drier. So that's what we were seeing here. Again, different kind of not all the greenery and foresting, but still, pretty in its earth tones and in its own way. So our next stop was in the town of Yakima, and that's kind of in the heart of Washington's produce region. Washington is actually the second largest producer of cherries in the world, behind Turkey. And cherries, I think, were brought to Washington really long time ago in the 1840s. So they've been growing for a long time. And some of you may know and like Rainier cherries, which are much more the kind of the creme de la creme of cherries. I mean, they're very expensive. They're probably not as easy to grow or pick. And from what I read on Wikipedia, birds really like them too. So the farmers lose about a third of their crop to the birds eating those Rainier cherries. So this was, I'm going to talk a little bit about Warmshowers. In Yakima, we stayed with Jesse here at a Warmshowers thing. And I think we stayed about 4 or 5 different Warmshowers hosts over the course of the trip. And this is a wonderful way. It's kind of icing on the cake when you're doing a long tour, that you stay with people who are, one, interested in meeting cyclists. They're often cyclists on their own. And they, much different than a hotel host or an Airbnb host who may not even be there. They give you kind of insights onto what their region is like and why they're there. I mean, Jesse had a really interesting story that he's Australian, and he was doing a long distance bike trip from South America up to Alaska, and he got into Yakima. It was kind of around Thanksgiving. Spent the night there, and then went on. And then the weather got really bad. So the house where we were staying invited him back, why don't you stay with us for Thanksgiving? And that the person who ended up inviting him ended up being his wife. So he's still there. He said he's not ever finished that trip to Alaska. So the cool thing about Jesse and his wife, who unfortunately wasn't there, is his wife works in the hops business. She's a hops broker. So we learned a little about the hops industry in and around Yakima. For a long time, the kind of hops that are grown in that region are not kind of the run-of-the-mill ones where you would find in Budweiser or Coors Light. They're a little bit more, I don't know, peculiar or different. So for a long time, it wasn't a very thriving region, but with the growth of the craft beer boom, the hops in that region are really much more in demand. So there's like an Oktoberfest where people can come all over the world to kind of try them out and buy the hops. It was really fun to hear that history. Another nice thing about staying with Warmshowers hosts is you kind of you feel you're at home and you get a great meal. So we had salmon and all kinds of things and lots of beer, and you get to, play around with the family dog. So it was really, really great to stay with him. One thing that at this point in the trip, Paul's having some issues with one of his front brakes, and we were trying to find ways to get that replaced. We stopped at some bike shops, and they didn't carry the part, and we're thinking, do we need to go to a Goodwill and kind of cannibalize things? And we're talking with Jesse about it, and he says, there's a free bikes for kids in town. I work there. I'll call up Ted and see if he can help you out. So Ted was very willing to do that. So we went down into downtown Yakima and into an old kind of fruit warehouse, and I think into a place called the Dungeon, and then picked out some parts, and the kids replaced it. So I had a great time chatting with Ted about free bikes for kids in the Twin Cities. So we were off, bike repaired, off on our way again. And our next kind of venture was through this road through the Yakima Canyon. Again, it's not all foresty and green, but it has its really own unique beauty. And it was kind of a sinewy road following the river through the canyon, just really, really pretty. I mean, after a while it started raining, but it really didn't diminish how beautiful this road was. So after going through the canyon, we were heading to this town of Ellensburg. You can see it was kind of in a flat farming plain. And Ellensburg is the home of Central Washington University, and where our next Warmshowers host was. So Gerard was a retired librarian at the university, and I think he writes poetry, and had some great conversations with him, and then met his wife, who was a Chinese national. She had been she had living in mainland China and was teaching, and she decided to do kind of exchange program to come to the US to teach in the US. But doing that really made her forego all of her benefits under the communist society. She lost her, I don't know if she lost her citizenship, but he lost her retirement benefits and things like that. So fortunately, things worked out for her coming to the US. I mean, she eventually met Gerard and they're having a great time traveling around the country in motorhomes. But it was just very fascinating to hear about that transition and what life was like in mainland China. So after that kind of brief respite on the relative flatlands, we headed up back into the mountains over this road called Old Blewett Pass, which is an old road that isn't used to go over the pass. There's a faster, newer road that all the trucks go on. So we had a really nice, quiet, peaceful climb up over the pass and in the mountains, and then to this town of Leavenworth. This was off the ACA route, but one of Ellen's friends said, you need to go to Leavenworth. And this place has a really interesting history. It looks like it's Bavaria, and that's the purpose. Leavenworth this was around 1960, was an old kind of dying mining town. And there were two guys who were World War II vets who had done their service during World War II in Bavaria and really were kind of smitten with that. And they had come, when they came back to the US, they kind of hiked and fished and camped in this region, and just had this idea about, what if we turn some town like Leavenworth into Bavaria in the US? So amazingly, this was done without any kind of tax dollars. All the people in town and businesses decided to just convert their town to this Bavarian town. And now it gets 1 million people a year. I think there was year round, there was a Hallmark Christmas movie filmed there. So it's really kind of fun. I mean, everything is in this kind of script. Even the Napa part store has, old English script on its signage. Of course, being in a European town, you have to kind of partake in European culture. So a little beer and some German food, and it was a great way to end that day. So Leavenworth was a rest day for us. So as we wandered into town the next day, we discovered there was an accordion fest going on in town, and we wandered into the community center and saw this line of accordions there, and started talking to the fellow next to them, and thought he was, I don't know, it was a museum, but he was actually selling them. But he talked about just all the benefits of playing the accordion. You can, it has both the rhythm and the melody, and easy to play, and like this one right here, this kind of mini accordion. He boasted at one point he had taken that in a backpack up in the Andes and played the accordion at sunrise somewhere on some Andean mountain. So fun to hear his stories. Then all throughout the day, just folks that came to this accordion fest were, at this kiosk in the middle of town, just playing music. And again, it was interesting to hear their stories about where this music originated in Europe or whatever. There was a tie to a particular kind of cultural thing or a particular town or region. Just fun stories. My dad played accordion, so it just reminded me of him as well. So we stayed in a couple places in Leavenworth. This was our first night stay. It was an old Haus Rohrbach, kind of a chalet-like place at the base of the mountain. And we rolled up into there about 9 o'clock at night. I mean, we were the only guests there, so we got an upgrade to a valley view, and then the host, she cooked these Dutch baby pancakes for us with whipped cream, and then the next morning we had cinnamon rolls. So it was just we felt pampered again. And then the following night we stayed with another Warmshowers host, Karen, who had this. She was a bike tourist, but had an intimate knowledge of kind of the natural lay of the land around that region. And then your husband was with us, and he was kind of quiet. And then I think Ellen asked some questions of him, and then he really got animated, and he told us this really cool story about when he was younger. He was a rock climber and found out about this opportunity to become a national park ranger and work at Devil's Tower. So he said, I'm going to go for that. And that particular year where he was this ranger in training, I think there was some indigenous folks were protesting something that was going on. So the National Park Service said, we need to kind of deputize our rangers in case anything happens. But Karen's husband really wanted no part of that. And he was saying, if things would have gotten into trouble, I would have jumped over to the other side. But part of this rangers in training thing was that these rangers were need to be trained and certified to use firearms. And her husband is no slouch with firearms, but when the time came for them to take the test to measure their accuracy, he just found a way just to kind of miss the target. So he never got that certification and never had to carry around a firearm. When we were, the night we were staying with Karen, she said, we need to take you up into Icicle Canyon because you're not going to bike there. And it's just this beautiful, beautiful place. And again, folks who backpack or rock climb may know this region. We were kind of at the trailhead to this place called the Enchantments, which is it's a series of lakes and really difficult steep climbs, but great rock climbing and backpacking. But we just got to enjoy the river. We probably hiked about a quarter mile up that trail, and this was a beautiful evening to spend, get out into nature again. So we left Leavenworth and headed down, and as you see on this map, these yellow sections were the sections that we were riding along the Columbia River. Came down and it was flat, and then we had this really bump up in elevation to go to Lake Chelan. And at this point, we were about halfway through our trip. The view of the Columbia River, it was a busy road, but the shoulders were really wide, so we didn't have any fears about that. And unfortunately, at this point, Paul, who had really not been able to train very much for this trip, maybe about 50 or so miles, he had developed some knee problems, so he decided to just to go home. He rented a car and drove the rest of our route, by car, and headed home. So at this point, it was just Ellen and I soldering on. But the sky and the clouds and the blue and all this stuff was really fabulous in its own way. Again, another thing that I, in retrospect, really enjoyed about this route is this diversity of all kinds of things that you would see, that would change from day to day. So this is Lake Chelan. It's a very interesting place here. It's a 55-mile lake. Or the star is where the state park is, where we stayed, and it transitions from being really kind of populated near the southern end to very much not so at the northern end. There are no roads up there. You need to get there by boat mostly, or plane. And the northern end leads up into the North Cascades. It's really a fjord-like place. Where this picture was taken, the lake is about 400 feet deep, but up further north here, I think it's about almost 1,500 feet deep. So it's the third deepest lake in the United States. View seaside, again, just gorgeous mountain views at sunset. And we really benefited from Washington State's kind of hiker-biker policy. This was a Friday evening we rolled in. It's a popular place, so all the campsites were taken, but their policy is that if someone who comes in on kind of human power, they're really kind of obligated to give them a campsite. So I think we ended up probably with one of the better campsites or the best campsite um, in the place. We had a lake view. We were camped under the amphitheater up here. There's a movie screen that comes down, when they're showing movies. But just a great way to wake up and have this lake in front of you in the morning. Some intel from our host Karen said in the town of Chelan there's a farmer's market, so we stopped and found some more cherries and probably devoured these in 10 or 15 minutes. So Ellen started walking back to the vendor that sold them to her, and he was saying, "There's something wrong?" She said, "No, I'm just buying more." So we had cherries all throughout the trip, or much of the trip. So as we transitioned, you know, closer and heading north, we were getting closer to the town of Twisp. And as you can see here, we were getting some glimpses of the North Cascades, which we'd be heading into in the next couple of days. And this region, this particular picture, things were pretty fertile because it was right next to the Methal River. But Twisp itself is more kind of scrubland. And we were hosted here by Scott, who was another interesting Warmshowers host. He'd done a lot of bike touring. He built his own boat and sailed the Salish Sea, which is kind of the ocean and waters around between the Pacific Ocean and British Columbia. He'd been a dispute resolution business, just a really interesting guy. And then on top of all that, he basically built this mini tiny house for himself. I think it was about 1,000 square feet. So just fun to get to know the people and why they live here. He found this town of Twisp just really had this community. The town had a theater and an art scene and some cool cafes, and he decided, this is where I want to spend the rest of my days. So we're moving on to kind of the next and probably the last big challenge of our trip is cycling up Washington Pass. Again, it was we went through the town of Winthrop and Mazama, which are kind of ski towns, kind of outdoorsy towns, base camps for people to go out and do mountain biking and rock climbing, all kinds of things in the area. So really fun places to pass through and walk around. But then we were heading up to the top of Washington Pass. To get there, this road we ran was called the North Cascades Scenic Highway, which is a very interesting road in itself. I mean, it came into existence as a complete road only in 1972. I mean, there were designs that have a highway over the mountains in this area since the 1890s, and it just never happened. I mean, roads were built into the Cascades on both sides, but they never met. But then in the 1950s and 60s, there was more interest and lobbying to do that. And eventually, when I think in 1972, the road over Washington Pass was completed and really connected both sides of the Cascades here. And that was kind of in tandem with President Lyndon Johnson creating the North Cascades National Park. A lot of the impetus for this road was from the logging industry, which wanted to use it, as a way to, get timber in and out. But I think the fact that they were going through a wilderness area really kind of diminished that idea. And now it's primarily kind of a tourist road, even though the logging trucks still use that. So we had a great morning to ride. It was about a 16, 17, 18-mile climb from Mazama up there, and just a beautiful day. There's some scenes here of some of our travels up that route. You couldn't ask for a better day. Pleasant temperatures, not much wind, all these blue skies, this crisp mountain air. Just hearing the mountain birds. It was just absolutely lovely. So as we got further up the pass, it was just really fun and thrilling to see, what are we going to see around the next curve? And the roads were curvy, and the trees were tall. So you would just come upon these just beautiful scenes. And then, the immensity of what we were cycling into and how little we were was just pretty cool. And then we would turn around and then see, this is where we came from. Really felt kind of small but mighty, the fact we had cycled this far. So we reached Washington Pass, and our host Karen back in Leavenworth said, there's you go up a quarter mile and there's this turnout to an overlook that you might want to go see. So we decided to do that, and it was certainly a good call. Just amazing view. So at this point, we actually were supposed to, well, we did go over Rainy Pass, but Rainy Pass was at a lower elevation than Washington Pass. So it's kind of a downhill. But again, true to its name, and this was mid-afternoon, we got there and it started to rain. But luckily there was this lush, deep forest, so we could duck under some trees and really not get too wet. And then when the rain passed in 15 or 20 minutes, there was this ethereal fog and mist that got burned off. Just beautiful, and this misty sight that we're in the midst of. So at this point, we were heading downhill for about 30 miles into the North Cascades. It was nice to be on the other end, and the sky is cleared. It didn't rain the rest of the afternoon, and we could just enjoy the ride. Eagle Eye Ellen had spotted this roadside collection of wildflowers. We spent a couple of minutes just wandering through there and taking pictures and enjoying the different plants, Indian paintbrush and columbine. There was some lupin and some mountain sandwort. It was just very, very pretty. So our end destination was here. This is Lake Diablo Lake. This it really bordered the North Cascades National Park, which has there's a lot of different boundaries here for really kind of political reasons. Much earlier than when the park was established in 1972, this area has been developed for hydroelectric power. So if people were advocating for this whole area to be a national park or wilderness, and that would have really caused the hydroelectric infrastructure to disappear. So there were a lot of compromises that there's a national recreation area, the Ross Lake National Recreation Area, which is where we were in, that kind of border that. So a lot of piecemeal stuff. I mean, the interesting thing about the North Cascades National Park is there's only one road that goes in it or through it, and that was the Cascades Highway we were on. And most of the access in the park is through backpacking trails or through water. So our destination today was we were going to go all the way around here, and then at this point there's a dam that you can ride across, and then we're going to end up here. One of Ellen's ultimate Frisbee teammates from college was working at the North Cascades Environmental Learning Center, invited us to spend a few days there and chill out with her. So we did that. Great place, kind of environmental learning, eco-friendly buildings and great food. It was just a great time to spend a couple days just chilling out. So sitting on the water, taking a canoe ride. The glacial lake was just again still and beautiful. We made sure to get on the lake in the morning because the winds pick up in the afternoon and it gets pretty difficult to paddle. But we had a wonderful time there. So after that, it was really the last leg of our our journey was down, down from the mountains towards the coast. We were traveling here along the Skagit River, which is a very interesting river. It just has, I think, 20% of the water in the Puget Sound Basin comes through this river and its tributaries, and it's one of the few rivers in the Washington state that supports all 5 different species of wild salmon: the sockeye, the coho, the chub, the pink, and the chinook. As we get further away from the mountains, it's flatter land. We got one more look at the mountains, and then one more stay at a Warmshowers house in Mount Vernon, and then our last attempt, or our last grab of Cherries. Just before we boarded, we had to take a Amtrak motor coach into Seattle and then hop the train to get back to the airport. So the speedometer shows 597. I think we actually made 600 miles. When we were in Seattle, we had to bike a little bit from the bus station to wherever, and I think it was like 599 point something. So I cycled in circles for about 5 minutes, and we made 600. And then Amtrak has increasingly having much more bicycle accommodating policies, and this particular train, we could just wheel our bike up, take off our luggage, and then they put it in the coach, so we didn't even need to box it up. So kind of relatively easy on and easy off.
Tom, it's Melissa. Tom, it's Melissa. Did you take the train all the way out there and back?
No, we flew into. Well, I flew into. Let me. I flew into Seattle, and my kids flew up. Ellen is in Berkeley, and then Paul was in LA, so we met there. I mean, the story I didn't tell at the beginning was we had an adventure right from the start. We all came at different times. We all had bikes and boxes, and I got there first, which was good because my bike is so big, it took a lot of disassembly and reassembly. And then Ellen got there, and then Paul got there last. And I had camped out near where the oversized luggage window is, thinking that the Paul's bike would come out that way. And like half an hour, it hadn't come out, and we discovered that it was like in another one somewhere down in the airport. So we lost a whole bunch of time, and we were needing to get to the Amtrak station to catch like a 6 o'clock train to get down to Olympia. So time was ticking, and Ellen got her bike built and said, I better go. We need to go to REI and buy some fuel for our stove. She said, I'll go to REI, I'll meet you at the train station. So by the time we got Paul's bike together, we probably had, I don't know, 30 or 40 minutes to bike, 3 or 4 miles to the train station. But trying to sprint with loaded touring bicycles, I think we did the best that we could. I mean, we made it to the train station. It was kind of one of those suburban platforms. So it was easy to get to, but we get there and we didn't know which track we were supposed to get on. We were supposed to get on the northbound track or the southbound track, and you have to cross under, and it was getting really close. And Ellen hadn't shown up, but we finally figured out we were on the right platform, and Ellen hadn't showed up. So Paul's calling Ellen, where are you? I'm coming. And so, she's getting closer and closer, and I'm looking up and down the track, waiting for the light of the locomotive to come. Hopefully I wouldn't have to kind of bargain with the conductor to wait for Ellen to show up. But she did, and so we made it there on time. But it was an exciting way to start the trip.
No kidding. For some of your pictures, were you wearing a GoPro on your helmet?
No, all those pictures I was hand holding my phone.
Your phone? Oh, wow.
That's why they're a little bit shaky.
Oh, I didn't see that part. I just was amazed at like the shot you could get. So very cool.
Thanks. Any other questions or anything in the chat?
What was the time of year?
It was kind of mid-June, the 15th to the 30th. Ellen, who lives on the West Coast, said, we need to do this early before the chances of wildfires come out, which really held true because that Environmental Learning Institute we were at, they had to evacuate that later in the summer because of fire that came really close to their property. So we had great weather, not very much rain. That it was a good choice in terms of timing, based on Ellen's knowledge and experience.
What year was this, Tom? You probably said
Last summer.
Oh, last summer. Okay,
Mhm.
cool.
Are you going anywhere this summer?
Nothing, no bike trips of that magnitude.
Okay.
I think I wanted to say about the ACA route, this was only half of the route. The full kind of Western Parks route goes out into the Olympic Peninsula and down the coast. And we chose not to do that, one, because the kids didn't have all that much vacation time, and two, we felt like we would see much more diversity in many ways here, and I think that held true. If we went out on the kind of western leg of it, we'd go through the Olympic Mountains and then maybe the rainforest and then a lot of ocean, but not this diversity that we saw on this eastern leg of this route.
I have a question. What kind of training did you have to do? You said your son wasn't quite ready for it. Like, when do you have to start to prep for something with all that uphill and?
I know, Ellen, you want to talk about that? Because you probably were more intentional about it or methodical about it.
She dropped off.
Oh,
Dropped out.
Yeah.
well, I mean, I'm pretty much active. I cross country ski, so I have a good aerobic base. I don't know how much I cycle beforehand. Trying to do some rides of length. I think our daily mileage is probably varied from a short day of 15 to we probably did maybe a 70-mile day, but for the most part, probably anywhere between 30 to 50, especially when you're in the mountains and you're climbing those passes. A 30 or 40-mile day is plenty. So I at least tried to do something, in that 40 to 50-mile range, just so my legs and my body got used to that. It's somewhat challenging, and because our spring is so short here to get those miles in, but just having a base and cycling a long time, I think that helped me. And Ellen plays on ultimate frisbee, so she had a lot of aerobic shape and did some bicycling in around Berkeley, which is hilly, so that was good. Paul, on the other hand, had a demanding engineering job. He was in the flats of LA, so it all didn't work out that well for him.
Wow.
But he was young, Youth made up a little bit, at least halfway through, for a while. It made up for the lack of training.
Wow, just amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome. One thing I want to say about Warmshowers is, if you haven't done bike touring and are intrigued by it, I mean, Warmshowers is a great way to get on the road and do a multi-day trip and not have to worry about camping or motels. I mean, there are Warmshowers all over the world, especially in the Midwest. Lots of people who do that. I mean, there's tons of people in the Twin Cities who do that. So you could do a week-long trip and maybe stay in Warmshowers all the time. So think about that if you're considering doing some bike touring on a more than just one day. It's just a great way. You get fed, the meals are free, you get this great accommodations and great conversation with the hosts.
How do you get a hold of them? Is it like warmshowers.com or something? Or
there's a website. It's a nonprofit, so warmshowers.org. And you can, anyone can be a host. And it's really set up like an Airbnb that, you post reviews of the host, the host posts reviews of the riders. So there's kind of checks and balances, and the host put what they're offering, a bed, or you only could camp in the yard, and they talk about what's nearby, what kind of amenities. Let's see, where was I going with that? Oh, if you're a cyclist, you need to basically, you need to pay to access the host. It's really cheap. It's like you can do a monthly subscription to their app. It's, I don't know, $3 or $4 a month. So it's dirt cheap.
Oh, so they get a little income off of that, maybe, or
Yeah, they need to support the website, which is really the thing that ties everything together. That's how you make the connections. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's a good deal for the price, and you don't need to have a year subscription. If you're cycling for a month, you can just pay that month's $3 or $4 and put it dormant for until the next time.
Thanks for watching this Minnesota Rovers presentation. If you want to see more, please click on the link to our channel or the subscribe button below. Thank you.